Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second in our People Matter webinar programme, a series of webinars organised by Cyber Risk Aware and the Oxford Cyber Academy, where we will be asking leaders from business, security and academia to share their experiences, challenges, lessons learned and innovation in human cyber risk management. Again, I think I can promise you all a really fascinating discussion this morning with two very close colleagues, Liz Murray and Richard Knowlton, and more from Liz and Richard shortly. And this morning we're talking about human factors in security and getting the emotional engagement that's so important with your employees. No slides, just an informal and hopefully an informed chat about one of the most critical areas of business risk that any organisation faces. Before intros, I just wanted to give you the context and purpose for the People Matter programme that we put together. I think everyone on this webinar will agree that our people are central to our organisation's success, security and resilience. We've known for years that hackers target people rather than technology, and for just as long we've been repeating the mantra that a vigilant, cyber risk-aware workforce is our main defence against cyber criminals. Yet despite all our efforts, we appear to still be struggling to crack the problem. Too many organisations still either ignore the human factor in their organisational resilience or apply outdated or compliance-driven tick-the-box approaches to training employees. Richard and I have been discussing this for a few years now, and we both firmly believe that we needed a fresh look. We need to exploit insights from senior practitioners, as well as behaviour and social sciences, that can transform the way organisations develop and sustain strong, secure habits and behaviours across their workforce. Both Cyber Risk Aware and the Oxford Cyber Academy want to bring you the very latest insights, innovation and ideas for effective security behaviour change. And that's why we've created the People Matter webinar programme. Our goal, our purpose is to help to provide guidance, know-how and a trusted network for anyone involved in developing secure cultures and behaviours in their organisation. We can learn from each other, from others outside security, from academia, and critically from the very people we want to educate. For me, it's our employees that typically hold the keys to unlock so many of the challenges and opportunities we face in security culture, awareness, and human risk management. So, firstly, a few quick introductions. I'll start with myself and I'll hand over to Richard in a minute. I've been in the security sector since, well, for too long, since 2000. I worked at Detica for 11 years before moving to Axelos Global Best Practice, which is a joint venture between Capita and the UK government, to set up new cyber resilience best practice, including Resilia Frontline Security Awareness Training. And I've recently joined the great team at Cyber Risk Aware, where we provide real-time behaviour-driven security education and training for organisations of all sizes around the world. I've worked with and advised many organisations in the boardroom, with the security team, working with HR and learning and development to help them adopt intelligence-led approaches to security education. I'm passionate about helping to change the relationship people have with technology and using evidence-based techniques and narrative in educating our employees and in building security that's centered around our people and not the other way around. And I'm also working closely with academia to better understand the behavioral science and the evidence base for what good security education and behavior change can look like. For me, society is still at the start of this journey. The goal is that we all naturally do security, or whatever we want to call it, whether it's digital skills or cyber awareness. For me, it's one and the same thing. And we're doing that as part of our daily lives. It's sort of hardwired into everything that we do at home, at work, and on the move. But we still have a way to go. One of the joys of my work is that I meet great, inspiring people, and without embarrassing them, that's the opportunity for me to hand over to Richard. Richard, do you want to say a few words introducing yourself?
Yeah, thanks very much, Nick, and hi everybody. Looking forward to this webinar today. I've been involved in corporate security not quite as long as Nick, actually, reassuringly, since about 2005, almost completely in the private sector, and working first of all in the financial services in Italy with a bank that was very important in Central and Eastern Europe, and then more recently in telecoms with Vodafone. I've been involved with the Oxford Cyber Academy for about the last 3 years, and I'm their Director of Security Studies. Oxford Cyber Academy really very much matching the sorts of things that Nick has been saying in its efforts. We want to develop and promote a culture of awareness and proactive compliance at the same time in everything to do with cyber and data security. And we do that by providing and facilitating expert knowledge sharing through our courses and through the research which we promote. And a small plug for myself, my next cybersecurity management course starts on the 13th of September. So like Nick, with whom I've been talking about these issues for longer than I care to remember, a very big emphasis on why is it that for so long we've consistently not been doing security awareness right. People matter indeed.
And Liz, over to you, our guest speaker for the day.
Thanks, Nick and Richard. Hello, everybody. Yeah, Liz Murray. I spent 20 years in the military, retired in 2018 when I became a veteran, which always feels like a very odd thing to say at what I still consider to be a relatively young age. That may or may not be true. I spent 10 years in the RAF to start with as an air traffic controller, where you are told and realise very, very quickly that everybody has a role to play to keep the plane and the pilot safe in the sky. If you don't speak up when you notice something that could fundamentally affect its safety, then someone could die. And in air traffic, it's all about communication and that passing the information across and making sure the information's understood and has been taken on board. Taking that forward, I then transferred to the army after 10 years, which anybody who is in a military circle will tell you is completely the wrong way. You go from checking in to digging in, but that's very much an in-joke in the military there. And again, found myself in a position where I was enabling the most junior to have a voice, because they were within a room where they were or within an organization where they were going to need to speak up and let everybody know what they'd seen, what they'd heard, and what the information was that they were holding to save lives in active theatres of war. So within those areas, those human factors become very, very key. People have to speak up because people matter, and it doesn't matter what your rank is, what level you're at, or how you perceive yourself. What you've got in your head can be the key between life and death. Now, when you're within the military, everybody kind of plays that role, and it's physical security. It's, you know, coming onto a base in the morning. If you've seen something that looks a little bit dodgy, you speak up. You've heard something that feels a little bit odd while you're in town, you speak up. And after my career, I was networking in, and funny, I was networked with a whole heap of people as I was in resettlement, and cyber was suggested to me, and I went, oh, don't be silly. And I said, definitely not cyber, definitely not a bank. And then I found myself working at HSBC as their UK cyber lead, which was a little bit of a surprise. That said, I fitted, and the reason I fitted was because that fit was made by the security culture I'd come from translates really nicely into cyber. We can translate all sorts of physical security elements straight into cyber security, and vice versa, actually. And there are very few military people who wouldn't find a home in a cyber security environment with some job or other, even without deep technical skills, because I'm not a coder by any stretch of the imagination. And as soon as we start getting into the ones and zeros, I get a little bit kind of, oh, okay. But that said, to pass over security culture properly, I need to be able to understand what that tooling does. And I need to be able to pass that across in a language that people can understand. And if I can't translate that into something that I can see in my home environment, then I'm not doing my job properly. So that's where I am now. I currently work for FNZ. We're a financial services organisation providing wealth management platforms. And I've taken over there as the security culture and awareness lead to deliver a an organizational change in the security culture, and to provide everything that we need to do. Over the last couple of years, I've sat on the FCA's, the Financial Conduct Authority's security culture working group, and had the opportunity to engage with heaps and heaps of people, either virtually or preferably in person, which was so much nicer, and I'm very much looking forward to doing that again. And really chuffed to be here today to support Nick and Richard's programme.
Thank you, Liz. Liz, something you just said before we sort of dive straight into the discussion.
Yeah.
You talked about your first role as air traffic control in forces. Yeah, and we often sort of use an analogy between cyber awareness and health and safety. And I've often found myself talking about the fact that within the airline industry and the nuclear industry, from the first second you start working for those organizations, it's drilled into you the importance, as you say, of putting your hand up and speaking, whether it's something that you've done or you see something else happening. And that the consequence of not doing that is potentially someone dying. Now, is that, again, I've had many discussions in the past that cyber perhaps, it doesn't ultimately kill people, although you could argue that with some of the attacks on some of the hospitals that have happened in the past. But is that something that, we've had this discussion, you and I, before, about some of the terminology we use that perhaps belittles some of the stuff that's going on out there. I know you're passionate about the use of the word scams, for example.
Yeah, I think we have to be really careful about making it important. And what I hear around me, and there was a program on TV this morning. I have to work with a little bit of noise behind me, and I have the BBC basically blocks through from breakfast all the way through behind me. And I've watched very little of it, but I twitch because the program that comes on immediately after breakfast talks repeatedly about scams. Oh, there's another scam. Oh, and so it becomes just another scam. And as soon as you reduce the importance of something to just another, or the word scam just doesn't quite cut it for me in terms of what's happening. If someone turned up at your front door, knocked on your front door, said, oh, I really need to come into you because I'm desperate, and you let them in because they confidence tricked you, they needed to come in, they were so, there was something about what they needed that was so desperate, you let them in, and then they stole all of your money. That would be it would be a deception, it would be a confidence trick, it would be a crime. Actually, a scam is no different. It's a crime, and we need to start making it really important for people so they understand that this is not something that they're helpless to prevent. If they know what to look out for in the same way as they do in the real world, they can look and go, that is a crime. And I think whilst they do talk about cyber criminals, the drama is they very quickly slip into the word of scammers. And as soon as you do that, you belittle what it is, you make it less important, and you also, to my mind, make people feel there's nothing that they can personally do about it until after the event. There's an awful lot of what they do after the event and very little about the actual prevention. And I just, there's various words that we use. Social engineering is another one. How technical does that sound? Social engineering. Well, what is it? It's manipulation. It's absolutely using somebody's own trust against them. But it makes it sound as though it's a technical phrase. I actually had somebody say, well, what tooling can we have to prevent social engineering? Well, we can't. There are technology elements that you can put in to try to mitigate the effect of it. But actually, I don't know what you're thinking on any one day. I need you to know how to protect and how to prevent. So yeah, I think we need to be quite careful about that language. And the same with cyber. You have this whole, as soon as you mention cyber, social engineering and scam, the majority of people who are non-technical are going, oh, well, nothing I can do about it. I'll just have to wait till I get ping.
Yeah. Okay. And any thoughts on that, Richard?
No, I just wanted to take Liz back, and we've had this conversation before, but I'm always interested to hear what she has to say. Where you started, Nick, which was that background in the services. None of us under 80, and I happily qualify, have done national service. So for the vast majority of people listening to this, for example, there will be a kind of image of what it's like to work in the military in terms of discipline. And it came to my mind this morning because I was listening to the debate on Sky between those who are vigorously against the lockdown and those who say, let the people be sensible, let them do their own thing. What is that balance in the military and then in its application in private life between carrot and stick when it comes to cybersecurity?
Okay, so in the military, once you have your discipline and your rules, you're quite lucky actually, because you tend to have a group of people who want to be there, who want to do their duty, who want to belong to that organization. So you end up with, you have that culture of belonging to start with, and you're part of this bigger organization. I don't see that as different to coming and joining a firm. If you've joined a firm, you're there because you want to be there. Maybe it's the boss that you followed or the actual organization that draws you to it. Most people have a draw to be there. So actually that collective, we can draw across quite easily. When we look at the military, people perceive that you're shouted at 24/7. Believe me, if you're being shouted at 24/7, you're probably not fitting in, and that's not the organization that actually exists, because that doesn't work. You need to be able to ramp it up and ramp it down, and you end up with that white noise. If you're being shouted at all the time, there is no discipline. You know, you need to have that, you need to be able to have that impact at a point when you need it. And sometimes shouting is necessary. If there's gunfire going on, you're not going to get by with a little bit of a wave and excuse me, do you mind? It's got, you know, those moments of absolute panic or whatever do exist. But for the most part, things are calm. The quietest place you will ever see is an air traffic tower bringing in an aircraft in an emergency. Because if everybody's wound up and shouting, someone's not going to hear something that's going on. So actually, when we've got those points at which things are critical, the voice dials down. And then when we look at carrot and stick, yeah, absolutely. The military is very lucky because of the way it's set up organisationally. That stick is quite a lot larger than most others. You know, there are things that you can lose your job for in the military that in civilian life you wouldn't. You might get a little bit of a tap on the wrist or a please don't do that, it reflects badly. But actually in the military, it's a far more specifically laid down rule set than we would have perhaps in Civvy Street. But you can pull those sticks in. Most people don't want to be in trouble. Most people want to do the right thing. However, we do also have people who don't really learn until they've been in the dwang just ever so slightly. And it depends on how important it is to their boss as to how important they perceive it to be, and actually how happy they are in their organisation as well. A disenfranchised employee will cause trouble whichever organisation they're in. And the thing for managers and people trying to deliver any form of rule set, whether that be cyber, whether it be I don't know, money laundering or behaving well or being nice to other people, because if someone's going to do you something with a cybercrime, highly likely they're not operating greatly in their other areas as well. It's about being able to call out that person's a bit of a drama as well. So you have that ability to deliver us a fairly hefty stick if you want to in the military. I don't think, and I don't perceive that's any different in the rule sets that I've seen in Civvy Street. You know, all of our organisations have rules and regulations we have to follow, and some of them just, you know, you sit there and go, right, well, what does my boss want me to do? And if your boss is advocating well for cybersecurity, then you're likely to want to please them.
Yeah, no, that's and so following on from that, Liz, you know, we've been talking with, you know, in the first few minutes around sort of the narrative that surrounds security. So what are your thoughts on the current narrative around security awareness in the industry? You know, and what changes would you like to see?
I still see too many times where the human is described as the weakest link. The employees are the weakest link. That stopped being the language of cybersecurity culture in about 2015. But of course, culture and language change and habitual use of it takes time, because it's been drilled into people for 10, 15 years that actually from security, we didn't really have a role to play when it came to online stuff, because that was the realm of those who knew about information security, those who dealt with the IT, you know, because it was a little bit of a, you know, it was a little bit of this magic going on in the sideline that we didn't really know how to affect because we didn't understand it. Actually, people need to be told and supported that there's something they can do, that they are part of that defense. There's that strongest link element, and there's something, it's not just within kind of the press that you see it. Quite often you see it in the press and the cybersecurity press and the various online blogs. But actually, I've seen it across quite a lot of the education and awareness companies, those who are purporting to deliver the content that you and I can leverage to go, you know, that's great, that's a video, but it talks about stop people being your weakest link. The minute you tell someone that they are a weak link, they will assume, again, there's nothing they can do about it, that it's something they can't affect, so why would they bother? If you consistently tell someone that they're rubbish, they will believe they're rubbish. I find so many parallels with cybersecurity and mental health, and I put a post on LinkedIn about people in coercive relationships. People stay in coercive relationships because they believe they're worthless, because they're told they're worthless all the time. If we're doing that in cybersecurity, then we're losing. We have to tell people that they're strong, that they're able to do something. They're intelligent people. I come back to my mum with this. My mum, love her to pieces, and she's not going to watch this, and she's definitely not in my house at the moment, otherwise I definitely wouldn't be saying this. But she routinely says she can't, and she can't do something. And I tell her she can, and that she's an intelligent female and I remind her of the job she used to do. And I say, I don't understand why you're finding this difficult. And then it's a case of telling her, helping her understand how to navigate whatever it is that she's doing. How do we get to the point where you understand what it is that you need to do in order to achieve whatever that task is that you've just told me you can't do? And it's about just twisting on its head and helping people understand that they can, they should want to, and actually it's something that's going to benefit them in various other parts of their lives as well, if they can help you in your organization.
It's fascinating. It's about understanding what's sitting behind that as well. Is it fear? Is it a whole range of different motivations that puts her in a position where she doesn't feel that she can do this thing?
Absolutely. And it is, and it's also habit, because and we see people taking on roles, and we see it all the time, not just my mum, but people take on roles where they say that they can't. I've got some really capable friends who have had children and have decided that they are now just a mum. And I hate the phrase just a, I'm just a. No, you're not. You're a very capable, intelligent person who happens to have kids. Brilliant. Now let's look at what your capabilities are. But as soon as you start describing yourself in those terms, then you lose the capability to do what you need to do, and to learn, because you assume you can't. You actually need someone to come along and go, actually, you're pretty amazing at that. Now let's help you understand how to, I don't know, apply that security policy in a way that works for you, which is what we want people to do ultimately, isn't it? They might read it and go, I don't understand it. I can't understand what that policy is. It's too technical. I don't get it. Well, if I can help you understand what that is, well, then you can help affect. But to do that, you need that person to feel that they're part of the solution, not part of the problem, and that there is something they can do about it.
And do you still see, and you're talking from a financial services perspective, heavily regulated industry sector, do you still see an organizational constraint as well around, a drive towards compliance first and foremost, as opposed to a drive for collaboration and trust with your employees, who are going to tell you the sorts of things you need to hear to allow sort of, influence and secure behaviors?
There's always a compliance element. I think that's going to be, we're always going to have a compliance element, primarily because you have to baseline. To baseline, you've got to deliver something that everybody receives. So you deliver a baseline security briefing that is hopefully in language that operationalizes the policies. It's no good delivering a baseline that just regurgitates the policies and asks people to understand that they're there. What you want is for people to understand how to do that. How do you actually prevent data leakage as a person? What do I need to do to prevent that? What do I need to do to spot a phishing email? And how do I report it? Because actually the policy is the bit that I need people to do, or we all do, is to actually report it. We need them to prevent, but then if they've spotted it, we need them to report. So you need to operationalize those policies. So we're always going to baseline with some form of compliance-based, and I hate the phrase tick box, but there will be an element of that. It does two things. One, it allows us to give us that metric to say, yes, okay, we are doing something, but it also provides us a baseline for delivering subject matter. So if I've picked my areas that have come from data, probably, what are we seeing? What are the attacks that we're seeing? What mistakes are people making? What behaviors do we need to influence? Those things are going to be the same no matter how I'm delivering them. It might be that I'm delivering them through some awareness content in an email or a video, or maybe some natty little pop-up or something. But however you're delivering it, what we've got to do is that consistent messaging. What do we need people to do about them? to do that, you've got to have worked out what your important subjects are, because there's so much out there. You can ping off into all sorts of little rabbit holes, and I could go down a proper ransomware rabbit hole, getting right into the depths of the discussion. Actually, most ransomware starts with a phishing email. I need people to notice a phishing email. If they want to go and investigate further about what the ransomware does as it whizzes its way through the system, that's great. From a behavior perspective, I want you to spot a phishing email. I want you to spot a spear phishing email, and I want you to know how to prevent that from going further and how to report that you found it. So it's drawing back to the basics, and then you can build from those, because once you can build from them, you can then pick the interesting bits that will grab people's attention. So compliance absolutely is always going to be there, but then we need to build culture. And in financial services specifically, the Financial Conduct Authority has nailed its colours to the mast about wanting to build culture in organisations, which from a perspective of a security professional like me is just perfect. If it's important to them, it's important to the organisation. That's really useful.
I totally agree. I was going to move on to culture. To me as well, talking about security culture is beginning to bring security out of its own little silo into supporting the business. We all know that security traditionally has been seen as a cost, and security says no, rather than actually securing the business for growth and success. And my hope is that talking more about security culture will help, and to help organizations build that relationship with the board as well, the leadership teams who, that's what they're interested in. They're interested in growth and success.
Can I intervene, Nick, just before I lose the thought? Because if I may say so, Liz, that was very dense. There was a lot to unpack in what you were saying. Yeah. Going back to what you were saying at the beginning, something that I feel really strongly about, we've used the word culture a few times now. Culture is based on values, and values for me point in two directions. You started quite rightly with the culture of the business towards its staff. How does it value them? How does it reward them? How does it bring them on? And we talked about this in our first webinar, Nick, with Charlie. The way in which security has not traditionally ever been involved in thinking about these sorts of things, but needs to be an ally of HR, because if staff are not being valued properly, then there will be security complications arising out of that eventually. And then the second aspect of values, of course, is the values that face outwards. I've been lucky to work for companies which have said, our highest value is a good service to our customers. And again, wrapped up in all of that, of course, is what service does to support that particular value in the company. So that would be my comment. And I hope, Nick, I'm not taking you too much off piece. Going back to the compliance point, in metrics, because boards always want metrics, and how you can actually justify what you're doing to a board by giving them the metrics that they say will tell them something they need to know.
Yeah, so the great thing about the way culture is being built and used, the way culture is being developed as something that's important is allowing that kind of measurement of understanding around an organization. When you baseline secure, and there are some great people out there with some fantastic questionnaires that can go out to staff that you can use to baseline. There's one that's based on Hofstede, absolutely superb. Will tell you what your people understand, what their values are around security, whether they're confident, and help you understand how much competence they've got. Because if I've got a confident, competent workforce in one area, that's brilliant. I can look at what I need to provide them to maintain that competence, and to say that their confidence is well founded. If I've got a confident but incompetent area, that's my danger area. That's the area that I need to start going and finding out, why are they so confident, and why is their knowledge not so great? What's missing? What needs to change so that area understands how to apply security practices so that they're actually helping to protect. And when you have a measure of that, actually those as baseline metrics are really helpful. I think they're more important. But those are the ones that you have to build once you've got a culture and awareness program. You don't get those from compliance. You get them from extra building on that program.
The frustration I've had, Liz, is I've seen so many organizations reporting about the number of people who've taken your training, or the number of people who've clicked on a phishing test link, or the number of people who've said, I've read the security policies and I understand them. It means nothing at the end of the day. It really means nothing.
Correct. My analogy to that very quickly is 100 people were told to line up at gunpoint. They had no idea why they were lining up at gunpoint, but they lined up. They were all compliant. They had no idea why they were there. Actually, 100% of people told to do mandatory training did mandatory training.
So what?
Yeah.
Just a little aside as well on that is that, have you found any impact and change to the approach that you take because of the new sort of home working environment we're living in around culture and communication?
Only so much that we're doing so much more online. Actually, the messaging is broadly the same, because I've always wanted to bring it into people's homes. I've wanted to bring it into an environment that people understand. It's absolutely no good me talking about what's good for the business, and it is talking about what's good for the business, but it's no good me getting into the depths of any tooling within the business for a group of people that actually never touch it, because areas of businesses deal with different things. Executive assistants, for example, aren't into the depths of what the coders are doing. They don't care what the developers are doing. They're dealing with what their boss is up to and their team around it in order to make sure that their lives are easier, and that they're smoothing the path, and they're getting all their appointments sorted and everything else, and keeping them protected from other people trying to get hold of them. There's nobody better to prevent someone from getting to a higher senior level in an organization than an executive assistant. They're amazing, and likely got a lot of information that they can share and help with, so that you don't need to bother the boss with it, for example. Absolutely no good me speaking about coding and development to one of them and secure by design. That doesn't mean anything to them. What do I want to speak to them about? I want them to understand how maybe their habits and behaviors on social media could see them targeted through a spear phishing email, or how their boss's behavior through social media could see them targeted, and what it is that they need to look out for, and what they need to be doing with their own settings on their Facebook. I remember vividly going out to a branch when I was actually back at HSBC, went out to visit one of the branches, and I delivered the same end-line messaging about how to protect yourself that I delivered to the board. When I delivered it to the board, it was delivered in risk and control environments to start with, and then and you're targeted like this, so this is how this would have an effect, and talking about the fact that the board as higher level people are targeted because of the work that they do, the knowledge they have, the fact they've got this high profile. I delivered the same social engineering message to them that I delivered to the people at branch, but when I spoke to the people at branch, the thing that was important to them was online dating. So we looked at it from an online dating perspective. And then I had somebody else who was worried because her son was online gaming and she didn't understand what he was doing. So, and who he could be being spoken to by and how he was getting influenced. So we also spoke about that. It was exactly the same influence messaging, just brought in from two different perspectives.
And for what you just said, Liz, it just sort of highlights to me the importance of stories and applying stories to different audiences, and the power of stories that are told well and applied and made relevant to particular people. You talk about the online dating. They are so powerful, aren't they, in terms of driving action rather than just understanding.
Correct. There's a terminology in counselling and coaching and mentoring that you meet the person where you find them, because they need to go through the steps of understanding to be able to influence their own behaviours. It's exactly the same with cybersecurity storytelling. You meet the people where they are at that time. It's no good going 4 steps ahead into deep technology if actually what they need help with is how to secure getting online in the first place, or having to put it into the analogy of a door lock or a house and securing your house. One that I use regularly is that I could potentially fit airbags to a car, but they won't ever work quite as well as they would do if they were designed in to start with. So I could bolt on cybersecurity protection into a program afterwards. It's far better if it's actually part of the security by design and it's designed to start with. So that would be the one that goes in for a developer. You know, that's why it's important that you don't just rush to get your fabulous new application that's amazing for customers to market without considering the security implications at source when you're very first designing it. It's absolutely no good. You've got to design it in. And so it's just making sure that people understand that. The developers tend to understand that. But what you have is somebody who doesn't understand the technology behind it, who's probably the sponsor for it within the business, who's driving it because it's amazing for their customers and they can see this great innovation that's going to really help, and they want it all through as fast as possible. And they see security as a handbrake because the security is being done at the wrong point in the process. It's about making sure that they can understand that it comes in right at the start, will help smooth the path. So it's about this. It is about storytelling and analogies. One of my favorite ones for myself is to start situating it around coffee, because I had a great coffee made for me in a coffee shop in Sheffield. And I posted about it on Twitter, but only after I checked that my location was off on the photograph. I didn't post it the same day that I was there. I didn't name the baristas and I didn't say who was with me. It was just very much a thank you for delivering this great coffee. They basically created a teddy bear on top of the coffee for me after I'd been in there 2 days previously and they were practicing some barista art. And I thought, that's amazing. That's really, and I said, that's really clever. Next time I'm in to stay, could you do some of that for me? And when I got to the end of the pass a few days later, this fabulous teddy was sitting on top of my coffee. That gives a picture of a big teddy bear sitting on top of my coffee now, doesn't it? But essentially it was great. And I wanted to say thank you. And the only way you can do that these days to get to the heart of the matter of those kind of organizations is to do it online, on some form of social media. But it's about doing it safely and knowing how to do it safely, and then not linking it back. So, you know, not adding people that I was working with there, not saying what time it was, not giving anybody an opportunity to pretend that they were there at the same time and knew me and then were able to link with me, whether that be through LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever.
And for me, I think stories also have a great power in you know, it's important that we all understand who's attacking us as well, and putting ourselves in the shoes of the attacker as a way of understanding the sort of tradecraft we have for that is being used against us on a daily basis. So, you know, stories, you know, we've got fantastic opportunity with cyber. We've got the good guys and the bad guys trying to harm us in whatever way. So I think stories are really powerful in that respect as well. And that's where sort of games come in as well, and the use of games, et cetera, et cetera.
100%. If you cannot analogize cybersecurity into something that everybody can understand, then you're not passing the message across. I always work on the basis that if I can, back to my mum, if my mum can understand it, then I've probably got the right level to be able to pass it across to most other people. But then obviously you have to then dial it up and down for an individual's either intelligence or their sophistication in the organization or whatever. You're likely passing the same message, you're just wrapping it up in a different story around the outside.
Sure.
Can I just jump in there? I mean, to agree thoroughly with everything you've both been saying about storytelling. You know, we security types have many big disadvantages, one of which is that we think that everybody thinks like we do. And secondly, that they know what we know. The simple fact is, unless we tell them in a way that they can actually absorb, they don't, and why should they? I think it's, you know, that those aspects are really important. The second thing, and Nick, you and I remember a conversation we had with, was he a 24, 25-year-old student a few weeks ago, who was talking about his level of knowledge of cybersecurity and the tricks and travails of working with the digital world. And he said, well, yeah, no, I've got my certain amount of knowledge, but you should be talking to the kids who are 15. They really know something. So in other words, this is also a very fast-paced developing situation. It's not static at all. And we've got to keep up with that.
Correct.
You've just highlighted, Richard, I've got 3 teenage kids, and it's a constant challenge to, it's that stick and carrot. It's that, you know, we want to help you and guide you. And also at the end of the day, you know, we need to understand some of this stuff, and you know, there are some implications of some of the stuff that they might be doing, but and you went back to your, you know, having children, Liz, earlier on. To me, and that's right, you were talking about a mother saying, I'm just a mother. To me, I'm not just saying this, the most difficult job. If you're bringing kids up, you know, if you're talking about behaviour and influence, they are the biggest.
100%. And the thing is, the people coming up are great at using the technology. They're really fast about how they post, what they post, and they're really all over the latest trends. When it comes to protecting, they're really poor, because fundamentally, as a culture in the UK and globally, we're actually pretty poor at building that. And we've spoken at length. I firmly believe there should be a green cross code for cyber, because, you know, back in the 50s and 60s, for everybody who's listening, Nick and Richard and I have had this conversation previously. My firm belief, back in the 50s and 60s, people were getting killed on the roads because cars were getting faster, they were harder hitting, and they couldn't stop quite so well. And the kids were still trying to play out, and so they were running out between the parked cars. And that's where the Green Cross Code came from, a means of saving life and making people take responsibility for themselves, much like we're all about to have to for our masks. You know, we have had a message battered home to us about mask wearing for, you know, 15, 16 months now, to the point that most of us will probably still wear one in a crowded place when we definitely wouldn't have done prior to March 2020. We need the same kind of focus on staying safe online to come from being very, very young. But it has to be a really simple message, because people don't know what they don't know. They don't know when they're about to get hit by the cyber criminal car, because they don't know what they're looking for.
Again, we're always in violent agreement with each other. But I used to work in accident investigation. I used to go out and investigate road accidents many years ago. And I met a senior guy at the FT a few years ago who was writing an article about road safety and applying it to the cyber experience. And he said, and I again agreed with what he was saying, the reason why road safety and roads are now such a really safe place to be in the UK. When I started back in the early 80s, they were a pretty dangerous place. And it was down to three things that changed. One was the technology. Cars are safer. You know, it's as simple as that. One was legislation and process. Seatbelts. You know, the seatbelt law came in when I was investigating road accidents. Surprise, surprise, fatal accidents, you know, plummeted. But thirdly, education. It was this, you know, it was the time of the Green Cross Man, that, you know, Green Cross Code and all that. It is. I couldn't agree more. It's the. It's so powerful that and Richard keeps saying that this is a societal issue, and we do need to sort of have a societal response. One of those would be a public safety sort of campaign, and some organisations, you know, have been successful at doing that and putting their own TV ads up, which are very good. So,
no, Nick, sorry, you know what I'm going to say, but I have to say it because I feel so strongly about this. And if you look back in even going back to the 80s, the number of public service campaigns there have been. There was the Green Cross Code, which I'm old enough to remember, but the one about HIV/AIDS when that first came out, about smoking, about excessive use of alcohol, public health in that particular sense. These campaigns were taken seriously and were effective. I mean, not fully effective, because no campaign ever will be. Why on earth are we not willing to have a public service campaign about something which is affecting every single person in our country every day? I've tried, as you know, Nick, I've tried with people in the Cabinet Office to see if there's any interest in doing this. It seems that there isn't. And I understand that there are lots of important public messages to get across at the moment. But this goes back over 5 or 6 years that I've been having this conversation, and there seems no interest in doing it. Final point. Of course, I always argue that if there was that level of more general awareness in the population, it would make our lives more easy in organizations, because people would come in with at least a basic understanding of what the threats are.
Great.
You're completely correct.
Just moving just moving the direction of travel a little bit. And I am conscious of time. We've just got a few minutes, I think. Liz, you said at the outset as well, the thing that seemed a powerful statement to me was the impact at the moment you need it. So how important is understanding the context and ensuring that the training that you provide is at that point of need to you? It's, you know, because I see, and lots of us, and we've all been through this, we're taken out of our working environment and we're told to do mandated training, not just in security, across a whole range of different areas. And to me, that runs the risk of just not being applicable and relevant at the time that you need it. And for me, the critical thing around security is being told something when you've just done something, or when you're in the process of you doing it. How important is that, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of different things you can use. You can either use nudge tooling that sits there that just does the check. Have you thought about that? We see it all the time. Did you mean to attach something to this because you've written about an attachment? And it's, there's tooling that's clever enough to do that. But actually, there's also the means of helping people understand where to go to report, and to make sure that messaging is repeated everywhere that you do it. It's making the message consistent, using probably the same language, so it just gets to start to be a little bit of an earworm, if you like, and making sure that email signature blocks from the people who are in security awareness, that's gold dust if it's pinged up there. There was one that had a previous organization that actually said, I'm mental health aware. The drama was what actually came up if you had that, so I'm mental. From a perspective of looking, it did make people look. It wasn't particularly great, but because of the way it chopped off, but it did make people look, which is kind of what you need people to look and go, where do I report? How do I report? And where do I go to? And having that centralized area for a reporting hub that's widely publicized throughout the organization really helps. And that reporting hub needs to be for everything. So there's a bit of a friction in financial services we've spoken about before, between the speak up culture for fraud and rogue traders, and reporting for cybersecurity. Because if I speak up, I'm doing that anonymously, and it's highly likely that someone's going to lose their job. And now you want me to report a cybersecurity mistake that I've made, and I'm not going to lose my job? Okay, so that culture, there's a little bit of a friction there. However, if you're able to situate them in a reporting hub that everybody goes to, they go, that's my centralized reporting hub, and my advice if I've got a drama hub, then actually you start to allow people to go to the point where they need it and they can find it, and you signpost it all of the time through awareness emails, through everything else that you do. Everything needs to reinforce that message about where to go to report, and be that point in time. And if you can do it through an app, brilliant. If you're using some online tooling that's got it, you've got something with a news feed that has that, like, where do I go to find that information? Just helping people understand. You want them to know where the box of plasters is. If you're in the office, you want people to know where the first aid kit is, where's the fire alarm. Those are the things you want people to know. They only know that if you repeatedly tell them and help them understand and signpost. So we need to signpost all the time.
And we're talking about emotional engagement this morning, and the final question for me is the leadership, and what's your experience of building the best ways for advocacy across the leadership team?
You've got to have buy-in at the top. It's got to be something that's really key to the leadership. And it's really great when you go and have a chat with some really high-level leaders in your organization, and they say, what do you need us to do? Yes, we'll help. And they come up with something, do you know what? It would be great if we could chat to that group of people. And you say, brilliant, I will go and do that. That will help us build out that knowledge. And then and you get that advocacy and that role modeling, because people within an organization hear so many messages about what's important to the organization and what's important to the leadership. If cybersecurity isn't one of those, then you're not going to be able to pass your message across the organization effectively. Because if I've got to prioritize work and I need to prioritize one thing over another, I'll prioritize the thing that my boss is speaking about, because that's important to him, it's important to the organization, and ultimately it's important to me, my job and my bonus, highly likely. If I know that cybersecurity is important to my boss, in whatever guise that is, because it's called different things in different firms, then I will prioritize that as part of those priorities. It will get higher up my thought list, and so I will likely do something about it sooner.
I would say, just to make a comment on that, that in a sense, security should be working towards the place where it becomes less important. Okay, that sounds a strange paradox. What do I mean? I'm thinking of one of the most famous companies in Europe that Nick and I know well, where in fact security is now in a purely advisory situation within the company, because security is actually owned, financed and run by high-level business executives who come together several times a year, no deputies allowed, take that responsibility very, very seriously, and drive security from the top. Okay, this is, as I say, an internationally well-known brand, very, very dependent on IT, cyber technology, and all of that. But no, absolutely agree. And my other comment on that is always that in security, we can have a bad reputation as being board bashers. You know, these stupid idiots, if only they understood. Well, these are not idiots. These are clever people, and they need to be spoken to in terms that they can immediately grasp and accept.
Completely. You know, what's the nirvana here? Culture, security culture is just the way we do it here. Good security culture is just the way we do it here, and everybody knows what to do when people aren't watching, and they need to have that skill set to actually be able to make the right choices. And
my little analogy, I don't know how relevant it is, but my eldest has just started literally yesterday, first driving lesson. And driving is, for me, when you start driving, you're thinking all the time about, am I doing this properly? And it's, you know, but then within a relatively short space of time, you get from A to B, and it's because you've just done it. You've done it safely. You've done it securely, and that does happen with habit and the right influences in place.
Yeah, you have to practice to get behaviours, and you can only practice. You know, I was thinking about this earlier on. In fact, and driving was the one thing that came to mind. So I was out for my run. It's what do we do habitually that we couldn't do to start with, yeah. And driving is one of those things. Usually, making a coffee, going and boiling the kettle, we can do that habitually without even thinking about it. But only when you've learned how to do it, and once you've learned the safety aspects around it, where not to touch the kettle because it's hot.
And designing bears on top of the coffee.
Yeah, if you've got the barista.
So Liz, fascinating. The final question for me for you is, what, you know, again, back to sort of emotional engagement. What are the key, you know, top 3 lessons that you've learned in building emotional engagement across a diverse workforce? And I think the importance of stressing diversity. We know there's no one single silver bullet, one form of training that's going to work in any shape or form. What are the top lessons you've learned?
You have to understand the culture you're trying to influence to start with, because you need to be able to speak that language to be able to influence it to the way that you want. I'm not talking about kind of having to be able to speak a foreign language to do it, but you do need to, if you're working in a global organization, you do need to know how the area of the organization that you're dealing with actually runs on a day-to-day basis. So international culture can be really, really important. So that would be my one thing. I think you have to understand what the carrot and stick is for some people. You don't like using a stick to get people to do stuff. That's not the way to do it. So what carrot is important? For some people, it's a competition. Actually, if we can do a competition that raises awareness, that's great, because it's the what's in it for them. Well, actually, it's something tangible. Sometimes that competition might not be the prize. It might be a league table showing that they're better than somebody else. So it's about you being inventive. So understanding the culture, being inventive in the way you deliver, and making sure that is that it's applicable, and you get out of the technology language. I think that's really key. The third thing is you take it out of the technology language, put it into day-to-day scenarios, and then pull that back. You know, what's one that I've had recently, you know, cybersecurity is like an umbrella, in that it provides that protection. But then that's great, but an umbrella never ever keeps our feet dry, or rarely does. So we need to understand what footwear we need to be wearing to keep our feet dry, and how to dress properly for it, and so that we actually then maximize the effect of the umbrella. That's the same with cybersecurity. We need to know what that umbrella is doing for us, and then what we need to do to keep the rest of us dry.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Liz. We have a couple of questions. One aimed specifically at you, Liz. How do you emphasize the impact and the crime or deception behind a scam without making employees fearful of activities online?
I think there's always going to be an element of fear when we start talking about cyber criminals. You can't get away from that, because it is something to be frightened of. What you have to do, I think, is then turn around and say, that is frightening, and actually what they can do and the capabilities they have are quite scary. But what we're going to do is give you the skills to be able to help mitigate it. And if you get stuck, we're here to support you. And the reporting, there is, if you report it to us, that will really help us out. If there's something you don't understand, come to us. You will be more fearful because you now have more knowledge about it. But here, let's help take that fear away. Let's sell you some sleep rather than selling you the fear, by helping you understand how to prevent and protect yourself. And I think that's really important, is that when you sell the fear, but you also sell and here's the solution.
Yeah,
yeah.
We have, thank you, Liz. The other question is from someone we know well, Richard. The government did run a public cyber awareness program back in 2013, but it didn't have the desired effect. Is that because the issue is seen as essentially technical or too complex? Does cyber present a psychological barrier for most people because it appears too abstract? And if so, how do we change this? I think we've covered elements of that in the discussion this morning anyway.
I think my comment would be, it was so effective that I didn't even remember that there'd been a public awareness campaign in 2013. I mean, I'm talking about something really, really serious. And my apologies to the Cabinet Office if it was done, but as I say, I don't remember that campaign. Do you, Nick?
I don't remember it either. And I think until people, there comes a point that it doesn't become important until someone high up loses a lot of money. I think that's where we start to come into it with cyber, is a lot of money, or something there's an outage for whatever reason that is fundamentally causing a drama for the country. I think when you look at it from this perspective, it's like, well, what's important? What's important probably is money, isn't it? And until somebody loses a huge amount of money, or someone pulls together the figures properly to look at how much money has gone to cyber criminals from the UK over the last 12 months, I genuinely think that will then go, do you know what, that is a massive problem for the economy. At the moment, it's hidden because it's hidden across a population, and not everybody's getting scammed. And so when you start to balance it out, you're looking at what is a relatively small amount of loss per every person within our 66 million population. Actually, if that comes to be something massive and impactful, then there will be action taken. I will be really interested to see what the states do following Colonial Oil. But for an email, but for a strong password and some two-factor authentication on a billing system, they shut down the East Coast pipeline because they couldn't bill, which is why the pipeline was shut. Actually, that's monetarily, it's survival. If that happened in the winter, people would have died. Once they turn it back on, it took 2 weeks for the fuel to get back up.
And the highlight there, Liz, is it was a password. That's the story. It's not the technical complexity of the attack. It's the fact that there was a poor password. We're very close to time. I'm conscious of everyone's time. So Liz, Richard, many thanks for what was a great discussion. Thank you for your time, Liz, in particular. I know you're very busy at the moment. I'd also like to thank Steph and Andy, who are in the background, working in the background to make these events happen. Just coming back to the People Matter programme, we do have 2 webinars in the diary in the future. We're giving ourselves a little break now until September. There we are. There's the details there. So the next one is on the 16th of September, where Sian John from Microsoft will be talking about digital empathy. Sian is a very well-known speaker across the industry. She's a great lady. And the next one after that's the 6th of October, when Kerry from NatWest will be talking about radical human security risk transformation. That's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Putting people at the heart of your change. So we've got some great, we might actually try and get 1 or 2 in around those as well. So we'll keep you up to date with those. We're trying to build a community here. So we would love your thoughts and ideas, your feedback, ideas for future speakers, ideas for future topics for us to talk about. So please do let us know. We will carry on communicating with you about People Matter. We'll be sending out a recording and a summary of these discussions as soon as we can. We look forward to seeing you in the very near future. Any other final comments, Liz and Richard?
No, just
for me.
Just to say thank you very much for being and engaging.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Have a great summer.